Alright everyone, quiet down. Welcome to the 2021 annual Merriam-Webster conference where we nominate a new definition for a previously existing word in the dictionary. Alrighty, let's start with the first word on the agenda, problematic. Okay, any nominees? Dear Evan Hansen, noted. Noted, dear Evan Hansen. Okay, problematic, got it. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and yes, today we're getting into my review of Dear Evan Hansen. A huge thank you to Universal Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this in theaters on the big screen. Now, the movie does come out this weekend in theaters only, guys, and we have a lot to talk about. And that intro, even though I was joking, it, well, has a little bit of truth behind it. The movie's directed by Chbosky and starring Ben Platt, who was also in the play that this movie is based off of. You have Kaitlyn, Amy Adams, and Julianne Moore. There are some powerhouse names, cast, and crew involved in this movie, guys, so listen, it has all the makings of a very good movie musical adaptation, right? But does it succeed? Now, we'll talk about that, guys, and we'll get into my thoughts, both good and bad. But before we do that, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I talk about movies like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all. Hit the thumbs up button too if you're a fan of Dear Evan Hansen, and get loud down below in the comments when you see this movie. Let me know what you thought, and if you saw the Broadway play, which one did you prefer better? The Broadway play or the movie adaptation? Now, if you don't know much about the story itself, Dear Evan Hansen is based on the Broadway play of the same name, and it's about a high schooler named Evan Hansen who struggles with feeling alone and not fitting in. But one day, after writing a letter to himself that ends up in the wrong hands, a series of events leads him down a spiraling path of lies that changes the course of his life and those around him. Now, before we get into what I thought worked in this movie, guys, I have to preface my review with this. I've never seen Dear Evan Hansen on or off Broadway, but I did listen to the original cast recording, I think a few years ago, and I loved the music. I kept listening to it on repeat. It was exactly what got me home on those long commutes after work. But yes, I love the music, so I was really looking forward to seeing how the story would unfold, because I came into this movie pretty cold. Alrighty, y'all, so you know what? Let's not take any more time and let's get right into the positives, and it starts with the performance from Kaitlyn. Now listen, every time I see Kaitlyn on screen, she's always stealing scenes, and in Dear Evan Hansen, it's no different. She plays Zoe, the girl that Evan has a crush on and the sister of Connor, who sadly committed suicide in the film. She brings this level of emotion and a very natural sense of acting that allows the film honestly to feel a bit more real sometimes, because there are moments, and we'll talk about it later, that felt unnatural, but with Kaitlyn, she was always able to elevate the movie to a level where I thought, oh, this is getting really good, but it's because of her acting. So whenever she's on screen next to Ben Platt, for example, I do feel like she's upstaging him even. And yes, her singing was actually pretty excellent in the film too. I just really loved her number, even though sometimes she gets drowned out by her co-stars, but I still believe that she brought the best acting in the film. And then there's another performance here that I really enjoyed, and that is Amanda Stenberg, who plays Alana, a classmate of Evan Hansen and of Zoe. Now, this character is very interested in making sure Connor's memory would live on forever, and even though I do believe that Alana's in a very supporting role, I found that Amanda Stenberg did a very good job, and one of the best jobs in the movie actually, at capturing a level of anxiety that high schoolers may feel but never truly express to their classmates in public. That's the thing about this movie. Sometimes it gets the high school experience right, and other times I do feel like maybe it gets it pretty wrong and it just doesn't feel as natural and organic. But luckily with Amanda Stenberg and with Kaitlyn, I do think that both of them deliver strong enough performances to where I thought, oh man, they're pretty much the standouts in the entire film. Alrighty guys, and now to the next positive, which is one I did not think would actually make this list, but the de-aging on Ben Platt is not that bad. Okay, listen, yes, it's noticeable, and I could definitely tell that his face is almost a little too smooth in some moments, and then you can see the wrinkles kind of peel through in others, but I do think that Ben Platt, even though, yes, he's way too old to play a high schooler, he at least looks too old to play a high schooler, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the de-aging is not as bad as some people I think were making it out to be. Alrighty, y'all, so let's transition now to the music, which again, I thought was pretty good here, but there's one stipulation. The music is good outside the context of the story itself, and I liked the original cast recording like I told you, and here I still think the songwriting, the actual instrumentation, everything sounds pleasant, but it has to be taken out of context, because within context, guys, the music is a little icky, but we'll talk about that again later on in the review. I did think there were some pretty impressive performances here, and I think songs that did stick with me have to be that titular track You Will Be Found, and even a new song that was added here, A Little Closer by Colton Ryan, who plays Connor in the movie. That song was pretty emotional, and if anything, I do think that was one of the songs that impacted me the most. But one more thing, guys, one more thing we got to talk about that actually worked here, and I do think it's the messaging. Now, there were sprinkles of good messages. Now, the overall message, but there were little bits of messages here that I thought, okay, this can probably speak to people who are dealing with mental health issues. Now, what Evan Hansen does in this film is ultimately awful, but because he did help some people out, I had very quick thoughts, where I said to myself, well, this is a good thing, right? That he helped people who felt alone and unseen feel like they were heard, and they were able to connect with Evan Hansen's message. So I can't hate on the film in that regard, but guys, there are a lot of things for me to really dislike about Dear Evan Hansen, so you know what? Let's get right into the negatives and why I think this is one of the more problematic movies of the year. Now, for this specific negative, we might get into some mild spoilers, so if you don't want to hear it, you can skip ahead just another 30 or 45 seconds. But if you do want to hear it, guys, let's talk about it. Evan Hansen lying about being best friends with Connor after he committed suicide just to appease Connor's family and Zoe, who he has a crush on, is totally and incredibly problematic. Honestly, I can understand if he lied at first and then went back the next day to apologize and just let it be, but the actual plot of this film is so troubling that it takes away from the entire experience. And this is where the spoilers pretty much end. So this whole plot really took me out of the experience of it being a movie musical, because whenever the numbers kicked into play and they were trying to kind of sell us on romance between Zoe and Evan Hansen, I'm sorry, I just couldn't buy into any of it. And it's really because Evan Hansen just continues to lie and lie, and not only does this ruin the mood and tone of the film, but how can I really enjoy these numbers when everything in the film that's happy-go-lucky is on the surface just a facade? There were some people next to me crying, and maybe that's because they really love the Broadway play or they just connected with the movie in a different way, but for me, someone who is actually an empath, and I think the best of people, not even I could get over the fact that Evan Hansen's lies just totally made me turned off from him as a character. He's incredibly unlikable here. And I don't think that by the end credits, the message carried very well on the big screen. I can see this working better on Broadway, maybe because I'd be able to really just take myself out of real world implications and feel like it's another universe maybe that they're acting in. But I don't think that on the big screen, in terms of realism that they were trying to add to this film, the message is as concrete. If anything, because it's so problematic, because it really just didn't sit well in my spirit, I just kept thinking about that rather than what's happening on screen. But outside of that problematic plot and the completely unearned moments for our lead character, I also didn't find that the movie itself was very well directed and produced. There wasn't a single frame where I said to myself, this looks really good. Instead, the cinematography was pretty bland and dull. Now, some movies I guess go for that dull appeal, but the music didn't match what we were seeing on screen. Every time Evan Hansen began to sing in a cheery way, I almost felt like I was staring at the most bland set design in the world, and everything felt so dreary. And speaking of singing, guys, the way that this film actually weaves in the musical numbers within conversations or different scenes is completely awkward. We see our characters having a conversation and then singing ensues, but in such an unemphatic way, where we see characters stare at each other and it creates a weird vibe. It takes me out of the film because instead I'm focused more so on why Julianne Moore is staring at Ben Platt, and it's so awkward. Or when Kaitlyn is just looking at Evan Hansen singing, and I'm like, y'all, is this supposed to be awkward? Is that the intention? Because from everything that I've heard from the Broadway play, there was a lot more life and impact that a lot of audiences felt. The only time I felt like this movie tried and succeeded in the whole movie musical aspect was probably the Anonymous One's number with Alana. And finally, guys, even though Amandla Stenberg and Kaitlyn Dever gave good performances here, I want to say the rest of our lead cast just didn't do anything for me. And that starts with Ben Platt as Evan Hansen. He just doesn't sell me on his performance, and he actually never sold me on being a high schooler either. That was one of my biggest concerns, because yes, I can suspend belief enough to where some actors play high schoolers and I'm like, you know what, okay fine, there were some older looking high schoolers when I was in high school, but he just doesn't really play as a high schooler here. He plays as a grown man. I didn't think any of his mannerisms were very natural, and it almost felt like, to me at least, that he was trying too hard to be downtrodden. And then there's Amy Adams, Julianne Moore, and Danny Pino, who I felt were doing their best. I just think that they were very poorly directed. And I was also scratching my head at any moment where our lead characters were delivered bad news, and it almost feels like the way they reacted to it was a little unnatural, and honestly, it didn't feel like they were being delivered bad news. It felt like they were, oh, that's right, I have to be sad here. Instead of actually acting it out as if it were organically developing right in front of them. I don't know. It just felt like, to me, this script, the direction, and even some of the acting just didn't come together enough for the movie to really deliver an impact that I think would have helped the film, especially in that third act. So overall, you guys, Dear Evan Hansen is one of the weaker movie adaptations I've seen of any Broadway play. Not only is the directing and the writing a little too lackluster, honestly, it just feels like the acting outside of the two performances I mentioned earlier were adding any sort of layers to this film. The movie did feel unnatural, but for the most part, the problematic plot was just too much for me to overlook. And I honestly sat in my seat for a good 2 or 3 minutes after the credits began to roll thinking, what message is this movie trying to tell? And maybe it really is just don't lie, because lying is not going to get you anywhere. Because listen, Evan Hansen, the way he continues to build upon this lie, and then the movie tries to make us kind of feel some sort of sympathy for him, it doesn't work that way, because all along the way, it's almost like Evan Hansen was getting rewarded for these lies, and then the movie kept throwing curveball after curveball, and none of it allowed me to really connect with any of these characters outside of Zoe, to be honest with you. I just don't think Dear Evan Hansen plays very well as a movie musical. Instead, I think it would actually play better on Broadway. So honestly, guys, Dear Evan Hansen is a big miss for me, and I do think that this movie is going to go down as one of the more forgettable and weaker films of 2021. So there you have it, guys. That's my real review of Dear Evan Hansen. Again, a problematic movie that has some good pieces to it, but the overall pie is just not very tasty. Hey, I need to know exactly what you think though, so go ahead and get loud down below in the comments and let me know exactly your thoughts on Dear Evan Hansen. And hey, if you enjoyed this review, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell and thumbs up button, guys, because listen, it's gonna be a busy rest of the year. We got so much coming in October and beyond, and man, I just hope we don't get any more problematic movies like this, because let me tell you, my internal commentary during this film actually was pretty hilarious. Alrighty, y'all, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.